The other thing that comes with that is that interesting fourfold structure. There's that body, the physical thing, the emotional thing, the intellectual thing, the spiritual thing. And we find that in all of those different religions. And again, I'm apologizing for bringing religion up, or specific ones, because I promise to be neutral. But the interesting thing is that if you look at them, they are all the same. Right? They have different stories around it, and why this happened, why that happened, and who got crucified for what reason. But ultimately, in the esoteric teachings, all of those major religions overlap. There's not much of a difference. When we talk about levels of reality, right, in terms of what's out there, and we talk about levels of selfhood, of ego, different parts of who you are. So that leads us beautifully into that multi-solipsistic universe. Right? I brought up quantums earlier, right? And this whole quantum theory can be used in many ways, because ultimately it's also just a model. Right? Remember, it's not reality. There is no such thing as a quantum. Quantum is just a word we came up with. It's a model, it's a map, right? But it works very well. You can use it as a metaphor. You can use it as a mechanism, explanation. You can use it as a gateway to some underlying implicate order or archetype, or it can serve, as explanation for consciousness itself and to that. I'm not going to talk very much about the mechanism part, because this gets very, very technical, and I'm more interested right now in showing you the other three. Right? With a metaphor, if you look at that, there's an uncertainty principle that I talked about earlier. Right? I can't measure, I can't think and have a thought at the same time. That's the next part here. You cannot measure uncertainty. I cannot know if I'm thinking something or if I'm paying attention to my thinking. I'm doing either one of them too. I can't do both. Right? So I never know what I'm actually naturally thinking, because as soon as I pay attention to it, all that grace is gone because I'm paying attention to it. So it's either or. Right? There's also, funny enough, when you talk about either or, that wave-particle duality. Right? All of quantum physics started with people saying, what is light? And that one beautiful experiment that showed that light was a little ball of something that kind of flew through space and had a specific speed and had a mass and had a specific point in one location. And then the other experiment showed that it was just a wave, a pattern, a spray. It could be anywhere. It's a possibility. So and the thing is, it was like, it's not either or, it's both. Right? And we have to get away from that either or, right, wrong dialectic. And that's why I started this off with, this is not the truth. There is no truth. There are multiple, maybe, or perceived realities of it, but there is no such thing. Right? So there's both and. Next thing you know is you have this whole idea of choice. Right? You've all had points in your life where you knew that if you just did what you always do, you would do this, but then at that moment you found yourself to be conscious, and you said, wow, I'm going to do that. Right? And you did something different, so you have that conscious, you can change volition. There's also the participant-observer part, where as soon as I observe something, I'm part of the observing process. I'm changing it, I'm changing the results. I can't look at my own consciousness. I can't step out of Philip and look from Philip from the outside. I can't even see my head. Right? I can see everything else. There's a lovely website all dedicated to this philosophy of headlessness that says we actually don't have heads at all because we can't see them. And finally, there's this whole separarization, this unified field, right, we've talked about. So, two people that I want to mention real quickly, David Bohm and Carl Jung, both said that quantum mechanics, and both said quantum physics, and Jung together with Pauli coined that whole concept of synchronicity. What he said, that there's this quantum level, and that underneath it is this other level. And Bohm called it the implicate order, something on a big ground that encompasses both the spiritual and the material world, and is underneath everything. And Jung said there was archetypes underneath everything. Archetypes was us connecting those two. Both said there's something underneath there that you need to dig out and find out what it is. Long quote, ultimately there's a third approach I talked about, where quantum is consciousness. And Goswami, who was one of the people in What the Bleep Do You Know, you might have seen him, he's the person who says that. He says that essentially quantum is what bridges those two worlds of the physical and the non-physical. And it's consciousness that creates ultimately that collapse. He also said that there's essentially these 5 different bodies, which he grew up in India initially and tried initially to fight that whole Indian Vedas and Hinduism crap as much as he could, and wanted to be a Western scientist. And then later in his life he came back and said, you know what, they were talking about a whole lot of things that made a whole lot of sense. She wrote two very interesting books. One is called The Self-Reflexive Universe, playing on Arthur Young's reflexive universe, and the other one is called Physics of the Soul, where he looks at those different stages of the Tibetan Book of the Dead and tries to come up with a quantum theory, or actually presents a quantum theory around it that will explain them. And they explain it, among others, to say there's your physical body, there's your brain, there's memory that gets imprinted here. And there's the next level, it's your vital body, like your subtle bodies. You have essentially multiple subtle bodies, but there's your emotional body, your mental body, your energetic body, and in all those, if any of you have had Reiki or Aikido or any of those things, Ki is the Japanese term for it, Tai Chi is another term for it, Prana is another term for it, that field that is around our body. You can actually feel that if you put your hands together for a while and play, you'll start feeling them without actually them touching each other. Or sometimes you've had that notion of someone walking into a room, you know that they're there, even if you didn't hear them or see them, you kind of just feel them. Right? So, as I said, there's the vital body, mostly emotional propensities, and then there's the, I think we just lost YouTube, and mental body, where you have, propensities for certain thoughts and to be had. Then you have a theme body, which is sort of the archetypal patterns you're in. All right, come on in. And finally, there's a causal or bliss body, which is sort of the underlying field of everything. So the map that I'm starting to get to, all right, too bad, 50 minutes. The map I'm trying to get to is this idea where God is ultimately the sum total of all possible perceptions. What each of you is perceiving right now, what I'm perceiving right now, what this plant is perceiving right now, because it's also independent of space and time and independent of the apparatus of perception. A human brain perceives something different than an animal brain perceives something else. And a plant, hello, welcome. And so there's multiple modes of perception, and God is essentially this sum total of everything that can be possibly perceived, right? And as such, it's omnipresent, omnipotent, blah, 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 all these omni things. But also nothing is happening. Nothing is happening. It's all just possibility, right? It's not being experienced. In order for it to be experienced, it has to go down and limit itself in degrees of probability. To say, well, here's all the things that can be experienced in planets that are round. And here's all the things that can be experienced on planets where there's men and women, and kings and queens and heroes and certain archetypal patterns. Right? And here's all the things that can happen or be experienced if you have certain mental propensities, where you're likely to have certain thoughts. And here's all the things that can be experienced when you have certain emotional experiences. Right? But ultimately then it pops into the body, and here's all of us, and we're here so that that self-referential system, that entangled hierarchy, as they call it in quantum physics, can be created. It exists, that actually determines ultimately the collapse of the wave into the particle, and it says, this is this particular reality from this vantage point, at this point in time, with this apparatus of perception. Right? Familiar? That was what we looked at earlier in terms of those different levels of reality. Those seem to also work in the quantum physics model, not just the religious one. In this case, what's the point of being here? With this all Maya and all that stuff? It's joy, it's play. Right? It's just a matter of saying, hey, well, I'm here, I guess, so I might as well do something with it. And